Welcome back to another episode of Recreation Rendezvous at the junction of nature and play. I am Julie Ramey, the Community Relations Manager for the City of Bloomington, Indiana Parks and Recreation Department. And here in the podcast studio today, we have a very special guest, Isak Asare. He is on our City Council. He is an at-large member. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much, Julie.
Thanks so much for being here. Well, let's dive right into it because everyone's so excited about Parks and Recreation
As
and
they should be.
How on earth we merge with City Council. So first and foremost, a big question for you is what feedback do you hear from your constituents about the Parks and Recreation system here in Bloomington?
Well, that's a fantastic question. So we get a lot of positive feedback about Parks and Rec. I mean, I think personally, from my personal perspective, and then also from constituents, I mean, our Parks Department is world class, and we are so lucky that we have over the last many decades invested in our park infrastructure in an incredible Parks and Rec department. I think we are, sort of the envy of a lot of the state in terms of how well we manage Parks and Rec, particularly. Certainly that doesn't mean we don't have challenges, but I think that the sort of diversity of parks that are available, the green space, the accessibility of a lot of them are things that are highlighted. There's a handful of things that people sort of complain about, if you will. Namely, the one that comes up the most is this concern around shade, particularly on playgrounds, more so than in just the green spaces, and then in our playgrounds as well. We don't actually have any enclosed playgrounds in the city. I think we just have one. So that's something that a lot of parents, I'm also a parent of small kids, but a lot of the mom and dad groups that I'm in, those are things that people often say, like, hey, can you get an enclosed playground on in the city? But I think people love our pickleball courts and our, the way that we're unique and creative with all of these spaces. But yeah, I mean, it's one of, I think, the gems of our city is our parks.
There's so many great parks to talk about, so I have to ask you, what's your favorite? Okay,
now it depends on the occasion. So for myself, probably Lower Cascades, just in terms of the tranquility of it, being able to go and walk up, do that little mini hike to go see the waterfall, and then there's a nice playground there with not turf but the squishy stuff, which is really nice, and it's shady, and there's the shelters, and it's also historic and easy to get to, and you name it, right? So that's probably my personal favorite park. You can't talk about our parks without talking about the Beeline, or the one I forget the name of the park off the top of my head right now, and I should have come with all these things on the tip of my tongue. But of course, the park that's up by the it has like red. Oh, what's it called? Totally forget. But up there, I think there's a golf course up there or something like that.
Upper Cascades?
Is that Upper Cascades?
The Lion's Den shelter?
Is where the Lion's Den
big
shelter.
That's a very shady playground.
Yeah, that's very shady playground, and the playground is so cool for kids as well. Of course, the new park that's sort of in changing a lot, but the one at Hopewell is really cool. I mean, we have a lot of cool parks. The splash pad there on the west side is fantastic. Is that Karst Farm? Is that
Karst Farm Park is a county park.
Is it a county park? Well, that one's really cool too. So that also raises a great point. Is that on top of the city, we're surrounded by all of these incredible trails and green space. So just like the whole system, or ecosystem, if you will, of parks and trails and all those type of things are just incredible.
Something that has always struck me as an employee of Parks and Recreation is how much people in Bloomington really appreciate their parks and are willing to support them.
Right.
So where do you see parks falling in Bloomington's overall quality of life? What role do parks really play?
I would say that it's right at the top. I mean, when you think about it's, parks to me are a form of economic development, and they're also a form of community building. They do so much for the city. It makes it a place where you can live first and foremost, right? And in order to have a good quality of life, you need spaces to take your kids. You need third places. We often talk about. So you have your workplace, you have your home, but you need that third place, that place of civic engagement, that place of enjoyment, environment. And our parks play a central role in that. But they also give a good sort of vibe for the city, because if you care for things like parks and playgrounds and green spaces, then it's a lot easier to see physically that we're caring for people. And you don't see that sometimes in like, in like our some things that often come to people's minds when you think about investment in economic development, or things like infrastructure, right? Like roads, right, is what people usually think of when you say infrastructure. But parks are this. When you go to a good park, there's something that it says to you about the quality of that city, and the way that we are using tax dollars to make this place a better, more livable, more exciting place to live.
Now, you mentioned third place, and that's kind of become a thing,
Right.
especially since the COVID pandemic,
Right.
which was, oh my gosh, 5 years ago, if you can
Which
believe that.
feels like 20 years ago, but
It's a time warp. But do you feel the perception of parks has changed?
I think so. I think that our and it's funny that I say that it feels like 20 years ago, because as much as it was relatively quite recently that we came out of the full effects of COVID, I mean, it does feel like a distant memory because all of the other things that have happened since. But I do think that it changed sort of the ways that we structure our lives. I think we certainly saw that in the uptick of people getting national park passes and those type of things, and that's maintained to a good extent. But I will say that, reflecting on Bloomington, I mean, we've always had a very strong culture of being in our parks, of riding bikes, of going out and being out with each other. That's sort of core to our identity as a city, and I think it has been for the last 20, longer. I mean, I'm speaking in my own, long time for me. I'm young, so is maybe a different window than a lot of people who might listen to this. But that's part of what it means to be Bloomington, and so yeah, I think that's changed, but I also think that we've done a fantastic job of continually investing in this space, and I think that that's something that's worth highlighting for listeners, is that parks don't just exist. They're things that are invested in, that cost a lot of money to establish, and money to maintain, and I think that that's something we've done a great job of keeping a priority, and will continue to do so, because it does change the quality of this place, and the more parks we can have, the better.
So now I have to ask you as well now, because of your role on the city council and you and your colleagues on the council, and thank you for your service on the city council, but you obviously have to hear about a lot of competing priorities, all the things that make our community great, special, and then also all the big challenges that face our community. So how do you balance all these great projects and parks and things with very real human needs and infrastructure and constraints? So what do you have a philosophy for how you look at all these competing priorities and fiscal management?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I mean, one of the things that I've spent the most time working on since being elected was on changing the way that we budget as a city, for particularly this reason. And so I wrote the legislation that's moving us towards outcome-based budgeting, and have done all of the research on that, right? And you can read that if anybody's interested in reading something that's quite boring. I, had a memo and report on sort of how do you do outcome-based budgeting and all of those type of things. But, my idea is that because we're dealing with taxpayer money, first and foremost, is that we have to approach it with a sort of return on investment type of mentality, that you want to be able to clearly show the citizens, not the citizens, residents, you want to clearly show residents of this wonderful city that their government is working for them, right? And they should be able to see on a day-to-day basis improvements. The antithesis is that if we were not here, if you did not have a large city government, what would you be missing out on, right? And if people can't answer that question, then we have a problem. And so we need to align our spending and our budgeting to particular outcomes. Now, to me, one of the outcomes that you really want to see is, in the broadest sense, economic development. But what you and now that can go in a lot of different directions. I think some people look at that in a sort of neoliberal, just it's all about growth and et cetera. There's certainly an element of that, right? You want to be able to grow wages, for example, grow opportunity, so that we have more tax money to reinvest in the community, so that we can have better services and et cetera. But another element of economic development is quality of life and quality of place. You want people to be able to look at the city and say, this is the type of place I want to live. I want to grow my family. I want to grow my business. I want to bring my, investment. So to me, those are actually like probably the two highest tier priorities for how we spend money, is that things that are going to help us become a better and not just bigger. I think but in many cases not bigger. I mean, it's about quality, not quantity, right? It's about how do we become a better place, right? And so really thinking clearly about investment in those things, and weighing that against some things that are like nice to do but maybe aren't moving the bottom line. And then similarly, there's some things that we do that are great and that have a lot of potential, but sometimes they're heavy lifts and they're not having the type of outcomes that we want to see. And certainly, I think actually parks is a really good example in terms of the department, Parks and Recreation. You all have always done a very good job of sort of outcome-based budgeting, and you think really carefully about, where are we investing, where are we charging, where are we not, what are revenue-producing activities that we can reinvest into the community, what things should we do versus should we outsource? There's certain, like taking care of the square or whatever, that we say, okay, like actually this is becoming a heavy lift, and it would be cheaper to outsource this and we'd maybe get a better outcome. Like those type of conversations are the things that I think we have to have a lot. And then the last thing is just about sequence, right? So you want to do the things, you need to do the building blocks first, right? So if you, for example, if you were to build a new commercial place, but there's no nice roads to it. Okay, like first, so you need to think about sequencing, and so that's also something that we always consider is like what's the first building block, and then what comes after that, and how do we do this in a way that it builds ecosystem in ways that make sense, right?
Well, it's so much fun for Parks and Recreation to talk about the really cool stuff that we do. You mentioned earlier off mic, we were talking about the new Hopewell Commons near the Seminary Square Kroger. Yes. And we've planted a bunch of trees. It's going to be a little while before there's significant shade, but we are planning for the future. But are there other Parks and Recreation projects that you're looking forward to seeing, to coming online and coming to fruition in the next, 5 years, 10 years?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So upgrade. We're doing a lot of updates to a lot of our parks, which is fantastic. Of course, I mean, this great example of all of the things that we've planted that take 5 to 10 years to. I remember just on Earth Day, it was just maybe three years ago. We did a City of Bloomington project, and again, I'm spacing on the name of the park. Where we replanted a bunch of trees that along the lines there. I've been back. My son did his second birthday there, and we went back, and you start to see the things that had just been planted grow. So I think that's really fantastic. A lot of like the multimodal paths. I think obviously I said that Lower Cascades is one of my favorite parks, and so really interested in how we might make progress in creating multimodal pathways there. Doing a lot of greenway projects that are really interesting. And I think the bigger picture, and I mean we could talk about a lot of these small jewels, but I think in the bigger picture, it's about connecting that whole system. And I think that for a lot of residents, I mean, we don't see, when we put in one greenway, right, we see the greenway. What we don't see is the whole network that we're trying to connect. And when those things connect, you're like, oh, I get it now, right? And that this was just one small piece of that. And so I'm just really excited as all of these projects come online and they get connected. I mean, just thinking about Hopewell as an example, how that's connecting the Beeline all the way through to downtown, to the Trades District. it's just really, really cool when that connectivity all, when all of those Lego pieces come into play. So that's maybe the thing that's most exciting to me. I'm also really excited about, I don't play pickleball. I shouldn't say that, but I don't have good hand-eye coordination. But but I love the fact that we've been experimental with a bunch of our parks, and I love the fact we're working with somebody like John Rasick. I mean, world famous designer of parks, and people always ask me why one of the reasons I got into politics was that in Bloomington, we have world famous people who, are the top of their fields in all types of cool things, and parks being one of them. And I'm like, hey, we need more of those people. I mean, if you're a local and you are an expert in parks, like bring your expertise, help us build parks, right? And so I love the fact that we're leaning into that local expertise as well, to continue to make things uniquely Bloomington.
John Rasick, an artist,
yes.
And in three-dimensional artwork, he has a sculpture at Rogers Family Park called Fleeting. It's very unique, very colorful, and there's a second installation coming to Hopewell Commons sometime in 2025. It's called Undulate.
That's exciting.
And really neat three-dimensional. I know I hate trying to describe art because it's so subjective, but what I'm hearing is it's going to be the new Instagram, the new selfie spot in town. So John Rasick, one of many, like you said, internationally known sculptors and artists and people who are bringing artwork here to Southern Indiana, South Central Indiana.
That's so exciting.
Bloomington. All right. So if there was one singular thing that you wish all your constituents knew, or something you want to tell them about their city parks and recreation department, what would it be?
If just one, I would say that where I started, I would probably end at the same place, which is that we have an incredibly well-managed park and rec department, first off. And I think the flip side of that is that investments in parks, as much as we all love what we may already have, it takes time. And so any of the things, I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of things that constituents talk to me about parks, particularly constituents with children. It's like, we're working towards those things, and we want to hear that input. But they're not things that we can, snap our fingers and do, right?
It's not going to happen tomorrow.
Exactly, and so, there's things that we're mindful of, we're investing in, we're making these changes. But I think really the one thing is, because we have such a fantastic department, it's like, give us your feedback, continue to participate in all of the listening sessions that we do, and all of the design sessions that we do, and be patient, right? But we're going from great to greater, continuing to invest in making parks and green spaces our priority.
Well, thank you so much for being in the podcast studio with us
today. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
And thank you for mentioning that there's so many ways to give feedback. So we are online at bloomington.in.gov/parks. That's a great place to find out about all of our parks and programs, all of our registrations, picnic shelters, our urban forestry program that manages around 38,000 trees on public property. So lots of stuff going on in parks and recreation. And we are always interested in hearing feedback, hearing about challenges, issues that you find out there on parks and trails and in our greenways, and definitely want to include all of the customer feedback and all of our community feedback in everything we do. So find us online at bloomington.in.gov/parks, or you can always feel free to give us a call, an old-fashioned telephone call to 812-349-3700. Again, Isak Asare, thank you so much for being in the studio with us today.
Thank you, Julie.
On behalf of the City of Bloomington Parks and Recreation Department, this has been another episode of Recreation Rendezvous. A big shout out and thank you to our podcast wizard and audio engineer, Caleb Poor, who's going to make this podcast and all the others sound amazing. Until next time, find Recreation Rendezvous wherever you find your favorite podcast, and we'll catch you again out in a city park sometime soon.